Yeah, I mean, you could get up and walk out. You just have to crawl out. All right, cell phones. Unfortunately, cell phones are not going off like they used to back in the old days. Although I do remember at Morning Star, I remember one night somebody was preaching, and I was so mad. I was mad because of the disrespect somebody was showing to the speaker. And there was an alarm going off. I go,
we're getting in trouble.
First of all, you should turn the phone off. You should turn the alarm off. I got so mad, I got up. And I went over to the usher. I said, you gonna hear that? He goes, yeah, I don't know where it is. I walked around, and it was my phone underneath my fingers. Gosh.
I believe it.
I was so convicted. That's like when we had sound problems here. We had sound problems here, and remember I had 3 microphones, right? I was thinking, what's going on with the sound? Then I got up, and I looked back, and I realized my son-in-law is now taking over that part, and I said, it's spiritual warfare. Because he does a great job. And it was spiritual, wasn't it? Because the line works. I said, you know what? Perspective means everything. All right. Okay. You guys ready? Okay, just count me down 3. All right. So around 3, 2, 1, you guys have to applaud. Ready? 3, 2, there we go. Good to see you today.
Lance.
Welcome today to the Lance Wallnau Show. Here we have the most amazing people. This is part of 20, 30 years of ministry. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Have a seat. God bless you. What a day, what a weekend. And so, Don, here's the part that is interesting to me. We have the Jack Smith cases, and I was worried about what was going to happen if Trump lost. Do you have any doubt that they would have tried to, in their malice, lock him up and make an example of him and put him away if they could?
They certainly would. You have to worry about New York. The U.S. Supreme Court this summer basically gutted these cases. U.S. v. Trump recognized presidential immunity. The Erlinger case said you got to have a unanimous verdict to convict. And of course, that judge up in New York, Mershon, and I talk about this in the book Kangaroo Court, said, hey, you don't have to have unanimous verdict to convict the president. So that was gutted. The Fisher case gutted what they tried to do on the January 6 cases. The cases were virtually dead in the water. The U.S. Supreme Court would have had to have reversed them. The Democrats would have tried to go forward, but the groundwork laid by the court this summer would have led to their dismissal, in my opinion. But we can't let it rest. We can't let it rest.
So now you've got a book, and everybody needs to know about this. Kangaroo Court: How Dirty Prosecutors and Sleazy Lawyers Destroy Political Opponents, Attack Free Speech, and Subvert the Constitution. He's a Publishers Weekly best-selling author, a Don Brown attorney, and now and this book couldn't come out at a better time. So, were you surprised that Jack Smith has to drop the? A better question. Letitia James, did you see what Mike Davis's little threat to her shot over the bow?
I did. I replayed that several times. That was
I wish maybe we'll play it for the audience here. He did an interview with Benny Johnson, and he's an advisor to Trump, and he's on War Room with Ben. And just to catch you up, Letitia James is she is the
New York Attorney General that has gone after Trump and tried to take his property in civil litigation in New York.
And she ran on the promise that she would hurt the man. And imagine making a citizen a target,
right,
and saying, if you elect me, I'll destroy that citizen. I'll find a crime.
And we discussed that very thing in the book Kangaroo Court. Both Letitia James and Alvin Bragg both ran after Trump, promising to get him in violation of the Code of Professional Conduct Responsibility for the state of New York. You're not supposed to do that. Making comments. They're poisoning the jury pool, attacking his right to an impartial jury under the Sixth Amendment, prejudicing any opportunity for a fair trial. Not that they would have gotten that in New York City anyway. And the book, Kangaroo Court,
Wait a second. Hold on a second.
yeah.
I don't want to go too far away. What did Mike Davis say?
He
Mike
said,
Davis
sweetheart,
issues on social media, not even in a document, but he tells her something so the whole world can hear it. What does he say?
He says, sweetheart, I dare you to go after the president this time. If you do, we are going to go after your fat ass and throw you in prison. That's exactly what Mike Davis said.
We're going to go after your fat ass and throw you in prison.
And after he called her sweetheart. That's exactly what Mike Davis. And so,
Sweetheart.
But I'm telling you, these prosecutors like Jack Smith and Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, Fannie Willis, they need to be prosecuted. Right now, we don't have the laws in place, but I've been calling for it. I ran for Congress. One of my platforms was this. The book calls for it. But we need rogue prosecutor laws because, see, these prosecutions, Lance, and whether it's a criminal prosecution like Alvin Bragg, a civil case like Letitia James, or even in Colorado where they're trying to take the president off the ballot under the 14th Amendment insurrection clause, which is ridiculous. This is a bastardization of the legal system for political purposes. And they are attacking the Constitution. They're attacking the First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, and all the voting amendments, whether it's the 15th or the 19th or the 26th. It is an attack directly against the United States Constitution. The United States Congress must, and so must the state legislatures, pass rogue prosecutor laws so that Jack Smith has somebody looking over his shoulder the next time. If they try to bring a case primarily, now hear what I'm saying, primarily for political purposes. I'm not talking about a meat potato crime. You know, Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr got into a duel. And, Alexander Hamilton bit the dust. Aaron Burr was prosecuted for murder. He wasn't acquitted. But that is a meat and potato crime. That is a crime against property, whether it's rape or whether it's murder or arson. That's a meat and potato crime. But these political crimes, and I do an analysis of these throughout history, you see one common denominator, and that's the phrase conspiracy. Conspiracy to fill in the blank. The only reason these cases were brought were to attack Donald Trump because of his political beliefs and his power. And it's not just Donald Trump. The Democrats have been using this as their modus operandi going back for over 30 years. A lot of it started right here in Travis County, Texas, and we discussed that in the book as well. But we got to get tough with these fools because what they're doing, if you don't have a blind justice system, if justice is not blind, then we're nothing but a tyrannical dictatorship. And my concern is, we've been given a great blessing this week. America has gotten a reprieve. But the last thing we can do is sit on our derrieres and not finish the job.
Well, here's the thing. The thing I love about Trump is why I'm just praying for him to be kept alive, and no other incendiary global war or distraction can delay the urgent work we got to do in casting out the devil right now while we got him bound. My good news is when you see that mugshot of Trump, and when he was first indicted, right?
Right.
And you look at him, that man was dragged through a process, and he knows it, like taken like a Roman prisoner of war, stripped and paraded in front of people on purpose. He will not forget that.
Nope.
And in his opinion, it wasn't him, it was the system, and it will do it to the next Donald Trump. So he's going to take on this thing because not only is he pissed off, but he knows that he's got to deal with it for the future. So who's the right person? In what position? Those of us that are still getting our civics lesson, where does a Kash Patel, or who do you think ought to be heading up this? What is the proper role for them in the cabinet to be able to go after that corruption that went after Trump?
Well, Jack Smith violated the Hatch Act. The only teeth, it's a toothless act. The Hatch Act prohibits federal employees from basically using their office for political purposes, and the DOJ used not to even bring actions close to an election. We don't have the legal teeth to prosecute Jack Smith at this point, but we can clean out the Justice Department. Chris Wray needs to be fired day one. We need to find an attorney general.
Chris Wray, for folks that are watching, is who?
He's the director of the FBI.
Why would he be fired?
Well, he needs to be fired because they have been complicit in the whole Russia hoax thing. They've been complicit in the FBI went down and raided the president's home, violated the Fourth Amendment. I mean, when you
how far back should they go in dealing with it? I'm going somewhere for this reason. I just got this week because we keep getting caught up in current news cycles. Operation Crossfire Hurricane, all the deliberate, coordinated work of the intelligence community with the Obama White House. That was Clapper and Brennan and Comey days, when they had worked with Peter Strzok and all that, and they were working on how to pin the Russia hoax. They authorized spying on the Trump campaign with docked up and manipulated, falsely stated FISA warrants. So now you got permission from the government to wiretap on a private citizen. They were doing it on candidate Trump in order to find something, look for something, anything that could link him into an accusation of being a Russian spy. But the reason primarily it's felt that this was done, this is like one of your books. Out of Putin, the threat was that he had evidence of the Clinton Foundation and financial dealings that were making profits for the Clintons, and that he was going to leak it. So they had to go on the offense and attack him by making him look like he was commiserating against the United States, and they killed two problems with one stone. They take out this sleazy leaking of data. Remember, Snowden was around back then. They were all paranoid. What's coming out? In Washington, there's a swamp. They're all making money off of stuff. So the fear was, what's going to leak out? We got to block Trump and Russia at the same time. So we'll create the perfect trap. We'll accuse Russia of commiserating with Trump, Trump with them, and they have to kind of create a fiction to take Trump out. So therefore, the raid down in Mar-a-Lago, I'm told, was because all the original documentation, proof of evidence, and everything was with Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and that as long as he has it, he has the power to expose their corruption and what they've done, whatever documentation he has. So they wanted to be able to get the documents, and they also wanted to be able to fix a crime. How much of that is an accurate description?
First of all, let me say about Mar-a-Lago. That sounds credible to me, but this Jack Smith, the Presidential Records Act uses the phrase former president. Not just president, but former president is used in the Presidential Records Act, which gives a former president access to his presidential records. There is no time, place, or manner restriction under which the president can't have access to it. So theoretically, you go to Guam or go to Puerto Rico, the Presidential Records Act gives him access to his records. And it does not prohibit any classification failure to access. In other words, I was in the military. Some guys here were, some ladies may have been, but there are different areas of classified information. We have confidential, we have secret, we have top secret, we have others. And so that the President of the United States, many of his records are top secret. He has absolute access to those records in the Presidential Records Act. This communist, Jack Smith, did not make that known to the grand jury when he went after the president. And of course, the judge down there, Eileen Cannon, brought that up and finally dismissed the case because it was a violation of the Constitution's Appointments Clause. But they were looking for something that would have caused probably irreparable damage, and it may have been the very same thing that you mentioned. Authorizing use of lethal force in doing it. There need to be prosecutions based upon that. President's attorney was talking about prosecution for a violation of rights. They've used that against us in the past, but every criminal inside the deep state that's been involved in trashing the Constitution throughout all this ought to be made to pay. Because they're attacking our Constitution.
Well, they are. And I think, I guess what consoles me is Trump almost, you listen to him, and if you're listening to him as a critic, you go, why doesn't he just let it drop, let it go? But he always brings up, they spied on my campaign.
Right.
And so that was the original sin, that he can't get low.
Right.
And so he's going to unravel this thing.
Right.
Like right down to they spied on he's going to go right back to 2015, 2016. Because once that ball starts getting unraveled, our prayer has been, we've been praying for 8 years here, that the enemy will be exposed, that the truth will be revealed. How many of you have prayed that prayer?
Amen.
Look, that prayer is being answered right now. Now, what we gained in intercession, we can only keep in intercession. So the urgency, the prayerfulness, the fasting, the watching, this shows what can happen when you have the believers believing and moving in unity and praying desperately. God can hear and God will hear. It's a very great encouragement. I haven't seen this level of answer to prayer in a long time, and I'm so glad it happened this way. Now, real quick aside. So I'm looking at Mike Pompeo, and I introduced him once for a fundraising event with a friend of mine. And he seems like a nice enough guy. And he's a Christian, throws you off. He's a born-again Christian, he's an evangelical. But he got sideways with Donald Trump.
Yeah, right.
And Trump just made a public statement. He will not be in his administration. And a lot of folks out there, including you, have real concerns about him as a deep stater. And so what was it that he did that revealed his penchant for playing politics? And what was the mistake he made with Donald Trump?
You know, Revolver News has a good article just this morning about Trump's decision not to invite Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo into his cabinet. And in Pompeo's case, number one, he's a neocon. He would be in favor of perpetuating the war in Ukraine, most likely, which Trump is not in favor of. But the thing that I think is the straw that broke the camel's back, he went on Fox News and was giving comments sympathetic to this very Jack Smith that we've been talking about. He was saying, well, the president had documents, and for whatever reason, he didn't give them back, and we can't have, I mean, the Presidential Records Act gave him the right to the documents. So he was leaning with the Jack Smith prosecution. The reason DeSantis and Nikki Haley jumped into the case to begin into the race, they believed that the lawfare was going to bring the president down. And they made huge miscalculations. And the comments that Pompeo made were along that line. And Trump doesn't forget that, and I think that's probably real. I don't think he can trust him. I think that's the reason.
That's the reason why, because he said there might be some legitimacy in Jack Smith's case against the president, because it's a window for these other guys to run for president. Even if it ties him up in court and you know, it kneecaps him from running, it's just, Trump does not forget that stuff.
There is zero legitimacy to any charge brought against the president in all these jurisdictions, zero legitimacy to any of it. Fannie Willis or Fannie bringing a RICO action because the president picks up the phone and calls Brad Raffensperger and asks what's going on with the count down there. And I was on the legal teams investigating that. I know all about Dominion and what happened there in Georgia and what happened in Fulton, DeKalb County. He had every right to answer those questions. As commander-in-chief, as chief executive, he has a right to ensure that the election is not stolen. And it was, Lance. I was on legal teams. I've seen evidence. You don't go, listen, think about this, the 2020 election. You have Joe Biden, who wins roughly half the number of counties that Barack Obama won 8 years before. Obama wins 800 counties, Biden wins 400 counties, and Biden has 11 million more votes than Barack Obama? Give me a break. So all of a sudden we see this 80 million votes and it spikes down again. There's an article in your friend Glenn Beck's publication, The Blaze. The Democrats may have exposed themselves by asking questions. Why was there a spike? We know why there was a spike. And they can say election denier, blah, blah. They can try to shame us in submission by name calling. It's not going to work in this corner. And so...
are there enough people that are noticing now? I mean, I'm looking at the graphs, right? Like you're talking about 2016, here was the Democrats' votes. 2020, here's was the...
Right.
And then you have this, where was that unusual spike coming from? Because it didn't exist now.
Lance,
there's not that many Democrats now. There wasn't that many then.
I was working
so the evidence is there, but man, the providence of God.
Yeah.
Trump in office 4 years ago would have been a continuation of a give and take and a this and that. And the Christian community being the people we are, if you like Trump, you're praying and supporting him. If you're not supporting him, well, how come he gets his character is a problem. He's always getting in war. He creates his own problems. I run into that stuff. And then the evangelical community is halting between two opinions. They don't see the real issue. They don't bring a real reformation because they're looking for a cleaner candidate, like a Pompeo. Oddly enough.
Listen, Lance, I made a comment in an interview this week. I'll say it now. Donald Trump is a giant in the history of American presidents. Okay? He's a giant. And he is the first president since Grover Cleveland to lose and win again. When you think about the pantheon of giants in American presidents, there's Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt. You got to put Truman and FDR in there. They were wartime presidents, JFK and Reagan. Okay? Trump is his own man. I'm not saying he's George Washington, but who else, considering what he survived? They dropped Billy Bush on him 3 weeks before the 2016 election, and Mike Pence tried to abandon him then. Then they prosecuted him, then they impeached him on multiple occasions. They tried to prosecute him. They tried to imprison him. They tried to assassinate him, and he emerges much stronger now than he would have finished if he had, by God's providence, just finished his term up. With the nation unified,
I think it just goes to show you, doesn't it? I mean, it's for us to learn this lesson. If God doesn't answer your prayer in the way that you want and the timing you want, this really is a real-time history lesson. You have to trust that he knows more than you and it's your best interest at heart by delaying the answer you want. And then the Christians get all involved with January 6th, and the prophets prophesied, and it's like adolescent. And then the real issue is, all right, this is going to cost you, devil. You're going to go and steal it. Right. But then the American people have 4 years of unraveling. Now Tucker Carlson goes from being an observer to an advocate for Trump.
Yeah.
Same thing happened. Russell Brand gets saved as he's realizing what's going on. Elon Musk goes from buying Twitter to becoming an advocate for Trump. None of that would have happened. RFK Jr. would not have converted over to the Republican Party. Tulsi wouldn't have come and joined the Republican Party. So and then the immigration, the festering immigration issue would not have continued to metastasize while crime is going up and inflation. In other words, it's almost as though, and this is what I was saying before, the prodigal son had a father who was praying for him and looking for him and yearning for him, who, if he could have, would have just gone down, opened up a sedan, and said, son, get in the car and get him out of there. But he couldn't, because the son had to come to himself. And so you have to have enough pain so that the son comes to his own mind, wakes up with the pigsty and says, it was so much better before with Trump than this. I mean, I know he's supposed to be a fascist and a Hitler. And then it was the humanizing of him on podcasting, the technology of how God uses communication, whether it's the Gutenberg press or in our case, we'll look back on this in a decade and say that podcasting was the Gutenberg press for getting around propaganda.
Yes.
Because when you have a 20-minute or 30-minute conversation, it could be scripted. But when you have a 3-hour long-form dialogue with someone bouncing back and forth, you can only script so far. Now you start to reveal your nano responses, your quick responses, what makes you laugh, how nervous you get, what you're thinking, how you interact. And Trump went from being demonized to humanized by 3 or 4 podcasters to a demographic of 35-year-old to 18-year-old men who were taken out by Jezebel, emasculated, made to feel weird and sidelined. Suddenly it energized a whole young generation. And the moment that happened, Trump started to become cool again. Our generation already decided something, but he got the borrowed credibility of a Joe Rogan and a Theo Vaughn and the various other podcasters, who his son Barron told him, you need to meet these guys, Dad. These are the guys I listen to. Well, who are they? Dad's writing them down. Listening to his son. Who is it? Anybody hear of that? All right. Well, get a hold. Can you do that? Get a hold of him. So they set it up for the old man. He said, the guy will. It's why it's interesting. He's an entrepreneur. Now, what happened to Bill Barr for a crazy segue? I want to know. I like Bill Barr. I listened to his speech at Notre Dame about how the collapse of Christianity in America is the problem. We've departed from fundamental truth and faith in religion. But all of a sudden, he acts weird. What was going on with him?
He is an enigma, like Churchill said of the Soviet Union, enigma, mystery wrapped up in an enigma. But Bill Barr, I talk about him quite a bit in the book in a couple of chapters. He went to Hillsdale College. To his credit, he went there and gave a speech on Constitution Day, September 17th, 2020, just before the 2020 election, and made the comment that we've got a problem with corruption and political prosecutors in the Justice Department. This is in the book. He also, to his credit, General Flynn endorsed me for Congress. I've worked with him some. He's a good guy. He was politically prosecuted because of his association with the president. When Bill Barr became Attorney General, Bill Barr ordered that case dismissed. It created, and I didn't realize, it created a rebellion within the Justice Department, and more than 2,000 DOJ employees signed letters to the Congress demanding that Barr be fired. And when he initially ordered a review of the 2020 election, he had a rebellion also. Then later he said, well, we never found any evidence. We didn't find any evidence because we never looked for any evidence. I've seen evidence. The evidence is there. No judge wanted to look at it.
Why wouldn't he look for it, though?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, Lance. I can tell you. It's a mystery. I was on one election team that was funded by a very prominent producer in New York. We were able to scrape data off the New York Times database. We were able to see, these ballot marking devices that data was being collected by a company called Edison Research in New Jersey and fed to the New York Times. The New York Times was then feeding down real-time data. So if you look at Fox News at 8 o'clock, Trump's at 100,000, 8:15, we see the numbers. What you're not seeing is 8:01, 8:02, 8:03. We were able to pull raw data. And that raw data in Pennsylvania and Georgia showed Trump 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 102, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 100, scraping votes. These ballot marking devices were scraping votes in Pennsylvania and Georgia from the president. And we had that. And I can tell you, one night I was on a Zoom call. There were about 6 of us. I was the counsel for the group that was doing this. I wasn't saying a whole lot. Senator Ron Johnson was on that call. The 2 data scientists, one was ex-CIA, one was ex-Navy, was on the call. The producer, I won't give her name, I'll tell you privately, was on the call. I was on the call. Senator Johnson was on the call. And about 30 minutes later, Jim Jordan comes in. Johnson was looking at the data, and he's furious. And he was holding hearings at that time about the integrity of the election. I'm going to use this tomorrow. The next morning, we get a call from him, and he does a 180. I'm not going to use it. I can't explain why that happened, but somebody must have gotten to him. But we had evidence, and no court. I've had good old Ronald Republican buddies tell me, Don, no court ever found any evidence, because no court ever looked for any substantive evidence, Lance. It was all dismissal on lack of standing. Now,
for the non-legal people, we're all getting educated. So that means when you have a liberal that says to you, every case got shot down by the court, there was no evidence, it was a lie, it's an illusion. No case got shot down by the court. They didn't look at the cases because of standing, which means what?
That means they claim that the person bringing the case has not been harmed, so therefore I'm not going to take the case. I personally took affidavits of Republican poll watchers in the TCF Center in Detroit, okay? Michigan was shut down, 6 states were shut down at 10 o'clock because Trump was swamping them despite the fact that the machines had been calibrated. They shut down. In the middle of the night, they're bringing in ballots in the TCF Center, and Republican poll watchers are saying they're having hundreds of ballots with Biden checked only. Nobody else on the ballot. They're running those things through and counting them. We had ballots of military guys born in 1900 that they were counting in the TCF Center in Detroit, since changed its name. None of that stuff was ever litigated before any court. So don't tell me there was no evidence. Listen, in 2000, the Supreme Court took up Bush v. Gore, which was, of course, the hanging Chad case out of Florida. And they did so based on equal protection because Palm Beach County was counting ballots by recounting in a standard different from other counties in Florida. They said that's an equal protection violation. The Texas Attorney General filed directly in the Supreme Court against Pennsylvania, and God bless Kim Paxton for doing that. I was on that legal team too. And I'm telling you, we try to recruit multiple state Republican attorney generals. I worked on 2 myself. One of the ones that I worked on saying, Don, it's going to look like I'm trying to change the result of the election. The other one that I was working became a governor of a state. Kim Paxton's the only one that had the guts to file it. And only Alito and Thomas were willing to look at it. The Trump appointees, Roberts got to them, they weren't willing to look at it. But they step in 2000, they punt in 2020, and I'm convinced it's because of the George Floyd riots, if you ask me. They didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. No court touched any substantive evidence in 2020. You don't just pop from 60,000 votes to 80,000 votes when you're hiding inside of a basement and then pop back down again. It just doesn't happen. Statistically, it's impossible.
All right, so I watched an interview. I actually did an interview with Jerome Corsi. He said that there's algorithms, Smartmatic, Dominion software, and he said you got to be real careful how you say it; they'll sue you. Yeah. So we have so I won't say it was stolen or anything was stolen. I'm just going to say we have vulnerabilities because of the algorithms and the susceptibility of the Wi-Fi ability to tap in and manipulate. And there's a program you can run. Well, why didn't they do that this time?
I think President Trump, I looked at I watched his entire 3-hour podcast with Rogan. If y'all haven't watched it, watch it. I'm in his camp. He pardoned my client, Lieutenant Clinton Lawrence, in 2019. I go to war for the guy. Lawrence was an 82nd Airborne paratrooper that Obama had put in prison for a firefight. So I'm in Trump's camp no matter what. But after watching that podcast, my opinion of the guy shot through the roof because of his command of so many different subjects. There was 12 rebar concrete for for nuclear reactors, or whether it's a history of Abraham Lincoln's obsession with Robert E. Lee because he didn't think he could beat him on the battlefield, and he did not for a long time, or whether it's McKinley's tariffs and the Blue Ribbon Commission, or he lost me on the WCF fighters here. I could keep up with him on most of this stuff, but the guy's brilliant. This campaign was brilliantly executed. Trump took the Democrats' tactics of early voting and he shoved it right down their throat by going after early voters who never had voted before. I personally know early voters who, I have a nephew of mine who was a libertarian, didn't like Trump, voted for him. My nephew's wife, they're in their 30s, wasn't even registered. Registered, voted for him, and put it on social media. We went after people that had never voted before. Trump saw the vision, he executed it, and he used their own tactics against him. And so the differentiation was so high that there's nothing they could do about it. And so
you're saying when he said swamp the vote and basically overwhelm the cheating by having numeric superiority, it becomes it invites investigation.
Exactly.
If you say, oh, you didn't win, where in the country, at what state and county are you going to want them to do canvassing? Because all you got to do is go confirm one county's anomaly. The Republicans, Trump would pick the most outrageous variation.
Right.
And then he would go in and say, we're going to put money in, we're going to be in courts, there's going to be a battle in the streets, but we're going to go to every door to confirm, did you vote this way? Did you vote? And if they get a statistical anomaly confirming that the votes are tainted, now you've got a reason to redo the election, and you got a whole I think they figured when the popular vote was going that way, they had a calculus, whoever they are, and it's like, he's actually, I don't know how he did it, but he's actually got Latinos and blacks disproportionately showing up.
Right.
We are gonna, where would we steal it and get away with it?
Right. See, he went right into the heart of their traditional support. And you know, you look at California, for example. All the counties in Eastern California went red. And the only coastal county that, well, one coastal county, Orange County, went red. Everything else is still blue, but he's made tremendous inroads. It's almost 60-40 in California. You know, there are 3,143 counties in the United States. Trump won 87% of those counties. She won 13%. 87%. And by the way, the Democrats want to end the Electoral College. The Electoral College is one of the greatest checks and balances in the United States Constitution.
But Trump just put a nail in that tire because their argument is the popular vote shouldn't be sacrificed to the electoral system.
Yeah, well, they're wrong about that.
But Trump getting the popular vote and the electoral has them going through a therapy right now. Like, man, where is our argument? I'll predict this. If they, as they're doing in New York right now, in Chicago, you can get away with this in a Democrat stronghold precinct. But if you try to create widespread domestic discontent and protest and destruction, at this point, it would be the worst PR strategy the left could have. It would literally lead to their annihilation.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is January 20th will be an interesting day because what we had in 2016 was a protest that was ignored. That's when I had my limo burned. So people that know me know my limo got firebombed by Antifa. That picture on the cover of Time magazine of an A with a circle around with billowing flames coming out of a limousine, that was my limo. I just walked out and Antifa bombed it. So there was no coverage of the violence. Right. On January 6th, there was hyper coverage and there was no burning limo. So I watched that too with great fascination.
Right.
If the Democrats try to amass, as they're capable of, because they do stupid stuff, amass violent mobilization of angry women, like the pink hat thing, and the Antifa protest, which was all happening at Trump's inauguration in 2016, I don't even think the nation's going to treat that as a gesture of just justifiable democracy and discontent. Because I think they know that the mandate is so strong behind Trump, that's a dangerous, it's going to reverse what they called Trump group as dangerous MAGA extremism will allow Trump to label them with some unique branding as dangerous extremism. And I think the pivot will be even harder against the Democrats. They'll fracture in their own party on those that say that's it, that is not who we are, we'll never get elected if we do that. They're thinking that now. They're thinking the trans vote. What they're saying personally, that they are not saying on the air, is the hyper-trans activism was what really killed them. because Trump went to the big sports bowls and to the big sporting events, and all he did was hammer the left on the trans issue. He didn't talk about America, the economy, immigration. He just talked about guys and girls sports. It's because he knows the guys watching the game are going, that's crazy.
Lance, my son is a paratrooper. He's in Europe. He spent almost a year in Afghanistan. I wrote a book. I've written 2 books on Afghanistan. A couple of them very tragic. So my son was over there in the last year that the president was in office. I can't tell you how much as a father I appreciate that, because he told the Taliban, you touch one American, I'm going to wipe you off the face of the earth. We didn't lose one single American to combat in the last 18 months, okay? But my son also, after October 7th, his unit in Germany was put on alert, ready to go to the Mideast depending on what's happening. Thank God they haven't gone yet. Within a few weeks.
You're talking about this past October 7th?
Yes. We have 4 deployed troops in Germany and Italy, as you may know. And within a few weeks of those contingency orders coming out, the Army dropped some dude in the middle of a combat unit wearing a woman's dress and high heels. Some dude wearing a dress and high heels in the middle of a combat unit. The president has got to eradicate and destroy DEI in the military and get rid of these DEI admirals and generals. They've got to go. For the last...
Does he have the authority to do that?
Yes, he's the commander-in-chief. He can fire any senior officer he wants. Boom, just like that. He can get rid of them. He's the commander-in-chief. And they don't have civil service protection like 95% of federal bureaucrats do. They're subject to the commands of the president. He didn't know what he was doing. You know, I wrote this book. Dave was talking about Extortion 17, about the shoot down of one of our choppers in Afghanistan. They made a movie about it. Salem has the movie out. It's broadcast by Salem. And General Mattis signed off on the cover-up of that shoot down. And so when the president picked Mattis as SecDef, Billy Vaughn, a Gold Star father, and Karen and I were saying, what are you doing? So Mattis is put in. This is Trump not knowing the first time. He's got a persona. He's a mad dog. They put him in. Trump had promised the first time to end transgender surgeries in the military. Mattis went to war with him internally almost from day one. Trump issued an order to the military to stop the transgender surgeries. Mattis went behind him and said, delay that order. And they fought all the way until Mattis finally resigned. Trump should have fired him immediately, just as he should have fired Comey immediately. But this goes back, number one, to out of the last 16 years, 12 of those 16 years, the admirals and generals have been appointed by Democrats. We've got to wipe out the entire senior military leadership. We've got to put guys like General Boykin, our mutual friend, back in charge of the military. We've got to eradicate DEI, and we got to take names and take no prisoners.
Let me add this. It sounds good, but here's the deal. So Trump had removed out of the State Department 8,000 woke personnel, and the guy he put in charge of that was so elegant, he never got his name in the news. So 8,000. As soon as Biden came in, he gave them severance and rehired them. So they got paid for the year that they were when they were out of work, and they got put back into government. So for us who are finally going appropriately out there in the audience going, oh, because now we're awakened. So the awakening's a weird awakening. It's a righteous, spiritual awakening, but we live so spiritual, natural, divided that now God's saying, hey, it's together. It's not over here and over here. Better put it together, because if we don't have a sustained victory.
Right.
So that's why, and it's so strange for me to be thinking this way, because I was thinking, like a lot of Christians would be, man, I'm glad I'm out of that now. You know, I'm getting negative press, hate mail, death threats. I'm not getting paid to do what I do. I'm what you call a self-funded surrogate. I'm not part of the political alliance where I'm getting paid to go on TV. I'm just doing this as a patriot, and it's costing me money. So I'm thinking, well, I did my job, Lord, didn't I? And it's like the Lord says, no, there's midterms.
Right.
It's like, oh, no. What are you talking about? He said, midterms. What don't you understand? It's like, I'm not involved with this. That's why I remember saying that when I went to Trump's first meeting with him. I'm not involved with this stuff. Lord, what am I doing here? It's like every time you pray in tongues, you tell me this is what you want to do. So I'm telling you, we have to build the wall. But it's the Lord told me today that was birthed in intercession can only be sustained by intercession. You are building a wall, and there are gaps in it. The devil and the Democrats, sorry, they got to put them both together, and the swampy Republicans, who are even sneakier, because they like the Pompeos and these guys. You think they're on your side, then they're working with your enemy. We've got to make up a hole in the wall, and only the Christians can do that by prayer and by showing up. we have to actually get more engaged, because that 2 years, he's got 200 days, he's going to, at first, then they're going to come back, they're going to try to, and typically, you lose when you're in office, right? So who knows what's going to happen. We have to hold that line, and we have, because what he kicks out will be put back in. My fear is, when a house is swept clean, if it's not occupied, it becomes 7 times worse.
Right.
And the things we greatly feared would happen here would actually happen later. And then our children will be dealing with a Marxist nation. But Trump right now, man, he is raging. I don't know if you're getting these little videos, but he's putting out little videos with flags behind him, and he's saying, here's the 6 things I'm going to do with the transgender thing. He comes right out swinging and says, I'm going to not only defund every hospital that does them, but I will actually allow laws so the doctors get sued. And they might get sued by the patient or by the parents. It all depends. It's like no doctor's going to touch that, no hospitals. He just nuclearized that. Now he's turning around and saying, now regarding this free speech, everything that pissed him off, he's got a vendetta on. He's a great personality.
Doesn't forget.
Because he's personally vindictive and doesn't forget a thing. And so it's like, it's all righteous though. It's like God says, yep, go for that one too. And he's saying, they took me off of Twitter. Elon bought it. I'll forgive them. Facebook, I remember that. I remember being misrepresented in the media and having my voice silenced. And I remember becoming tainted by January 6th by a misrepresentation, and these people are in jail still. And I was silenced in Mar-a-Lago. Nobody would even want to talk to me back then. I was a pariah. He said, that's all because of loss of freedom of speech. I couldn't talk to defend myself, and no one could hear me if I did. So he's going after every university, every internet carrier, after Google, for any form of suppression, shadow banning, or any collusion of government, the Department of Defense, the the FBI, and Homeland Security. He lists all of them and says, if anyone in government is doing what they did before and pressuring a platform like Twitter or Facebook to look into certain narratives about COVID or about election fraud, he said, they will be subject to the highest form of criminal consequence. So he's coming out swinging in every direction. To keep this momentum up is what you want. And I'm already 10 minutes over the broadcast. Real quick, tell them how they can get a hold of the book, and why should they read it now that he's already got elected and is apparently exonerated?
Well, Kangaroo Court was, I was on several election teams. I don't have time to go into my background a bit. We can tell you about that later. But Kangaroo Court looks at the history of the Democrats' criminal prosecutions, using lawfare as a weapon to attack the Constitution. And it leads up to and includes the last third of the book discusses the Trump prosecutions, why they're constitutionally defective. But it goes into a history going back 30 years. In fact, here in Texas, in Travis County, there was a prosecutor named Ronnie Earl. They prosecuted Kay Bailey Hutchinson because she took Lloyd Benson's seat, a seat that had been held by the Democrats for 100 years. They prosecuted Tom DeLay, who had been the House Majority Leader. They couldn't defeat him. They prosecuted him, got him convicted in Travis County, took him $11 million. They prosecuted the former governor, Rick Perry, because he vetoed a bill, which he's allowed to do. The Texas Constitution gives him a line item veto. And so it talks about prosecution. I talk about a lot of the cases you've heard about, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, but not just about political leaders. When Trump said in Georgia, they're not going after me, they're going after you, that's true. So we talk about Paul Vaughn and Mark Howe. These are 2 pro-life fathers who were prosecuted under the FACE Act in retaliation for the Dobbs decision. So the SCOTUS overturns Roe. 18 months later, these guys who are Christian fathers face felony prosecution. And then there's Douglas Mackey, who was a cartoonist in Palm Beach, who just did a cartoon lampooning Hillary's voters as being dumb, and he's right about that. They are dumb. In 2016. 5 years later, when Biden comes into the White House, they prosecute him under a felony. So these political
felony of what? For what?
For conspiracy to prevent rice, conspiracy to block voting. The history of political prosecutions around the world deal with, most of them are under conspiracy to fill in the blank. Not meat and potato crimes like murder and larceny and arson, who are firearm your car. Conspiracy to prevent voting rights, that sort of thing. It's just a total bogus thing.
That's true. So, so they had podcasting from Firewall or from Flashpoint, and from my podcast played in the courtrooms of January 6 people under trial to make the case that they were under the influence of incendiary influencers to motivate them to these acts. So I was played in court, and I got notified, hey, you're being used as evidence. I didn't know for whose side, defense or prosecution. But I thought, you know where this is going? If this goes the wrong direction, then in the next level, which is what Trudeau was going, they will go retroactive into your history of comments made in the past that contributed to a future event because of the conspiratorial, inflammatory nature you had in setting up and inspiring that level of public organization. So I was actually looking at that and going, they could go back and play anything I'm saying. They could go back to right now and say this is evidence of what incited people to do what they did then.
Precisely. And I represented the kid in the Capitol on January 6th, appeared before the very same judge, Tanya Chutkan, that Trump's been in front of. The kid's father called me, and get this, Lance, about 6 o'clock in the morning, the third week in March of 2021, said, Don, I've got 12 FBI counterterrorism agents in my house right now. The FBI, the father had called me a couple of weeks earlier, said the FBI wanted to talk to his kid. The kid had just put a red hat on and walked in the Capitol and back. Kid put on a red hat and walked into the Capitol and back. 12 FBI counterterrorism agents. I said, okay, I'm going to throw on a jacket, suit, and I'm going to go down to the federal courthouse in Columbia. I got down there. I see the assistant U.S. attorney, said, what's going on? They got the kid charged on 5 misdemeanor types of trespass charges. 12 FBI counterterrorism agents. And I do an analysis of this in Kangaroo Court. In the George Floyd cases, they dismissed, and I think properly so, about 95% of the First Amendment type of cases. In other words, trespass, misdemeanors. In January 6th, they're prosecuting 95% of the cases, and most are misdemeanor trespass types of cases. It is a political witch hunt. And I'm hoping the president, if you hit a police officer or if you broke into the Capitol physically, you ought to be prosecuted. But everybody else ought to be pardoned, every last one of them, as far as I'm concerned. And I've been in D.C. dealing with this whole thing.
All right, where do they get a hold of your book, Don? How do they get it? Amazon?
Go to Amazon, type in Kangaroo Court by Don Brown. We need to get the book out. This is my 16th book published. I've never really tried to sell one before. But you ask why this book needs to go out. Solomon said, without a vision, the people perish. We got to know who we are. We got to understand the enemy's playbook. In the great movie Patton, George C. Scott says, Patton, I read your book. You son of a you know what. This will expose the enemy's playbook. And what I want you to do is please get the book, buy 10 copies and pass them out if you can. Get it out there. Then I want you to write your members of the Congress and demand rogue prosecutor laws, and write members of the Texas legislature, wherever you're from, demand the legislature's act to make it a criminal act for a prosecutor to bring prosecution solely for political purposes. We got to put a stop to it. Listen, they're going after Trump's attorneys. And if they can break through the attorney-client privilege, they'd come straight at you. And if this becomes a precedent, because that attorney-client privilege is rooted in the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, Sixth Amendment right to effective assistance of counsel, and it's a sacrosanct thing. He's right. It's us if we don't stop him now. So we got to continue to take action. We got to make the left more worried about us than we are about them. We got to become their worst nightmare. And we have to make a commitment to do that.
It's time to prosecute the prosecutors. Lord, we pray that you who hear our conversation will have mercy upon this country and destroy the toxic, demonic infrastructure that they put into our government. Root out that decay, Lord, and grant to us the ability to occupy with righteousness that void. I pray for everyone here listening to this broadcast, everybody here that is in this studio audience, and for Don Brown himself. I pray, Lord, that you will show us what we must do in this next chapter, that there would be a clear trumpet sound, a clear call, a clear blueprint, and that with Christian civility and character, we can represent and properly present Christ to the United States in a compelling, sweeping, great awakening move that will bring in 40 million souls in this next presidency. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, brother, that's yours.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you for being with us today, all of you. so grateful for you. Now, Dave, do you have a final thought that you have? I forgot what we're doing at the end of the day. I feel like we should just keep doing stuff. Are you having fun? Thanks for coming down for the weekend. I thought Dave was crazy when he said, let's we got to do a partners weekend. It slipped past me because I was traveling. And next thing I know, I authorized a weekend here, and I thought, that's terrible timing. I mean, the election's happening. I mean, I figured we're going to be in turmoil, and I'm going to be doing in the studio, and who's going to want to? And I thought, well, if they steal it, we need to be here to talk about what to do. Actually, that's how bad I'm so like PTSD Pentecostal. It's like, well, if they steal it with the algorithms, they stole the last one and got away with it. And so I thought, we're going to meet. We're going to throw a partner prophetic party, because I remember Graham Cook, I had him over at my house. He said, in the UK, when there was an attack on the church, we'd actually do the opposite spirit. Like, if there's a spirit of pride, you go in humility. If there's a spirit of hate, you go in love. Well, if there's warfare, you have a party. So you celebrate. So he said, you move in the opposite spirit, because the kingdom of heaven is an opposite force. So I thought, yeah, you know what, Dave, maybe it's providential. We're committed to doing a partner event. It doesn't seem like it makes sense, but actually partners are the best people, because they're people that they've sowed into what you do. They pray for you. They're going to invest in coming. Those people you have more authority to lead and help me get the mind of Christ for what I'm doing than consultants. Because consultants I have to pay. There's no affection, no love, no discerning there. They're just professionals. But you guys would have the mind of Christ. So I thought, you know what? Whatever happens, we're going to have a party. We're going to move in the opposite spirit, or perhaps celebrate, which is what we did. And I'm going to tap into you guys to tell me, what do you think we need to do? Because there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel, and I'd rather hear from you than hear from a hired, expert. So we got it all done, and it was all thanks to you, Dave. So thanks for doing it.
Well, thanks to you.
Birthday boy. Today's his birthday.
And to Lance's credit, it was a decision. You have to decide these things months and months in advance. So we sat down and thought about it. Didn't have a crystal ball, but it really was an act of faith to bring us all together at a point in time when, no matter what the outcome was, it was going to be an important time for us to get together and talk about these things. Lance, I felt we checked the box. We hopefully were thanking all of you for standing with us. And it really does, especially from my office, I get to open up the fan mail and the hate mail from this guy here. We're going to do a section, viewer mail. We had one come in from Satan himself the other day, which, by the way, he lives in Colorado Springs. He didn't give me his address, but it was postmarked in Colorado Springs. We received the other one the other day, just was filled with just cigarette ashes. Apparently, you're not even good enough to get a letter these days.
He gets stogie ashes.
But he gets hate mail and fan mail. But it means so much to this guy when he sees people stand behind him. You know how it is. I mean, it's great to get out there and kind of hubris, say, though none go with me, yet I will follow. But it's also great to say, it's great to have a room full of people with me and as I follow. So hats off to you, Lance. So I hope we checked the box with that, ladies and gentlemen. We thanked you. So many people said they love the gifts and love shopping out there and getting all those gifts. That scripture that says, come and buy without money. There was nothing to be sold here. It was all, through generosity of Lance and the team. And then hopefully we cast the vision for you on where this guy wants to go and form the vision with you. We were watching it, those of us on the team, watching the vision be formed as you're talking with people. We could see inspiration coming. And then 3, just, asking you to stand with us, to come with us, that we're an unusual tribe. I'm getting to know us more and more, but stand with us as we go forward. There's plenty to come ahead. So hats off to you. Great job, Don. And I remember you and I were sitting with Tom DeLay. And we were just in a casual situation and him talking about how he was bludgeoned. And sure, he came through, he was vindicated.
It was such a shock. I listened to him with Rush Limbaugh on an interview talking about the role of 527s and the financial ways in which the McCain-Feingold, whatever it was with the change of how corporations could get involved with funding for campaigns. And the Democrats picked up on it in seasons. Soros ran with it. They found a way to jury rig getting money and influence into politics which wasn't intended to do, but it ended up doing it. And he said, it's amazing. He said, that these guys prosecuted me. I was the whip. I was the strongest guy in government for getting the votes all conservative lined up. He said, and he said, then he said something happened. He said, when they came after me, it forced me, because I was under indictment in a criminal thing, I had to step out of politics.
Right.
They found a way to accuse me, to remove me from politics, so I could not run.
Right.
He said, but what's worse yet, they not only bankrupted me and had me wondering about whether I was going to prison, but George Bush and I inaugurated a prison near Houston in a place called Sugar something or other, Texas. He said, and I actually was joking because that would be the place I'd be going to prison. He said, he and I built the prison for the inmates, and then that was where the Democrats were going to put me. And he said, and I thought, wow, it's crazy. I actually inaugurated and opened and cut the ribbon on the prison I'm going to go into. And he's innocent. Right. But when I read that, I thought, this is horrifying. And I had a moment I really regret. I really, really regret this. When I was with an older guy, more experienced, multimillionaire, who took Tom DeLay out to meet me at lunch. And Tom asked me, he said, do you think I have a future at all in politics? And the guy says, sorry, Tom, no. But that was the wrong answer.
Right.
That was the wrong answer. But I was too young, and I thought, well, I'm learning. I guess that seems sad. But I would have said the opposite. I would have said, no, defy it. Defy it and expose it. Because that's what Trump has done, is he said, if you're right, go ahead and keep fighting. Fight, fight, fight. Because if you're right and you're called to do it, then the anvil will end up breaking the hammer.
I'm thinking of another example. The three of us have a great friend, General Jerry Boykin, and just sitting in conversations like this, the four of us, telling about how that man, a great American hero, true American hero, fought in Mogadishu, led troops, because he said of an operative, he said, my God is bigger than your God. They tried to remove everything from him, his pension, they tried to disgrace him. It's amazing what can happen when people stand up. But I think you're right, Lance. Trump is a real kind of motivator for all of us. If we stand on truth, truth is like a balloon.
The thing about him is, I don't know yet, but I get the impression that he likes competence. He doesn't want anybody to get him into needless, loss of prestige. But if you were to say, if Jerry was to say something like that under a Trump administration, Trump would say, he's right. He would actually agree with him. He'd say he's right. He said, I think, well, in other words, you have somebody who will allow you to now do what you've got to do. It's like he said to me once, he said, you guys want me to deal with abortion and gay rights. That's not my job. That's your job. You don't understand. Your job is to persuade the public. Mine is to create the systems that reinforce your morality. So if you can win the argument with the American people about Christ and Christian morality, I'm with you. I agree with you. He said, but that's not my calling, that's your calling. My calling is to deal with China, set up the systems, and give you justices that will rule according to the Constitution. Your job is a sustained pattern of public persuasion. You win the argument for hearts and minds, and I'll give you systems to enforce it. That's a wise answer. He said, don't give me your job description, that's your job. So, in the name of Jesus, let's do our job. Now, my question for you is, we're doing this experimental gathering. Is a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a good time to do it? It seems like this is a logical thing. It doesn't work for pastors, but it works for the rest of us. Secondly, frequency, getting together for these debriefs, and I would have, the way I do this in the future is I would have subject matter experts that you're seeing on podcasts or broadcasts. I'd have them come in and kind of interview them like this, so we would have information for the tribe as to what's going on. But how frequently would it make sense to do that? Is it once a year is good, twice a year? You guys want a quarterly option of coming together and meeting and coordinating as a group, hearing what's happening? Quarterly, you think, how many would say quarterly? I mean, you don't have to come to them, but at least you have the option. If you don't make this one, you make the next one. If you miss, people that miss this have to wait a year, right? Yeah. How many say quarterly? How many say biannually, 2 times a year? How many say 1 time is fine? All right, so we have, so those who say, 2 times a year, If it's quarterly, you just come to 2 of them. So that's fair enough. You just pick the one you want to go to. Look at who the speakers are. So we might do something that's a quarterly gathering, Dave. It might be what that means.
I think we could move it around the country a little bit too.
That's my next question.
Yeah.
All right. You're jumping to the next question. So where Dallas is central, how many of you say you want to see it on the West Coast 1 out of 4 times?
Yeah, look at that.
How many people say you want it on the East Coast 1 out of 4 times? All right, let me get more specific. Northeast, Southeast. Yeah. Washington or Florida? Well, we have disunity already. That's good. Okay. I guess when you say West Coast, you're talking about California. Washington? Oh, Orange County.
Republican.
All right, now just to make this clear, East Coast, West Coast in Dallas? Is that what you're saying? I went to Central. I got to do it here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How about if we did just 3? We just did 1. If we did 2 more. Because we're not going to do it quarterly. It's too much. I can see Mercedes already. I can see a gun to my head. That's not going to work. So she won't even like it, 3 times. But if we did it, all right, so we're doing this one in Dallas. Next one, should it be East Coast or West Coast? West Coast. How many say East Coast? See, the West Coast are noisier, that's all. How many say West Coast? We're going to end up in Dallas again. All right, I got that. We'll survey the rest of the tribe, too.
Well, we want to say thanks to all the staff, the behind the scenes, the cameramen, the people, the volunteers.
Sign this for me?
I don't know if you saw the volunteers.